All right, guys, so we've got to talk about the midterms because those are rapidly approaching. I know it's only February, but it's coming up on us, and the Trump regime is already working overtime to try and find ways to rig the 2026 midterms. I'm going to get into this really scary thing that they're trying to do in Arizona, and this is going to expand into literally every other state. Before we do, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're not already subscribed, hit the bell as well. That way YouTube will notify you whenever I upload another video. And let's get into this. So I've been talking about this for a little bit. There's pretty clear evidence that Trump wants to use ICE in order to monitor polling stations during the election and intimidate voters. This just proves that that is exactly the plan. So here's what they're trying to do in Arizona. The purpose requires a county recorder and a county board of supervisors to enter into a written agreement with federal immigration law enforcement personnel to provide the presence of such law enforcement personnel at all locations in Arizona in which voting is conducted or ballots are deposited for the 2026 general election. So they want ICE or CBP to be at every polling station in Arizona. This is ridiculous. And this is literally like they're going to intimidate voters. The very presence of ICE, I think, is going to deter a lot of people from voting. But it gets worse. So the language of the law is actually insane because what they're doing essentially is they're trying to make it so that ICE gets to be there. And in the language of it, they're talking about how they're allowed to conduct their lawful duties. So here are the provisions. It requires county recorders and each board of supervisors, notwithstanding any other law and for the 2026 general election, only to enter into a written agreement with federal immigration law enforcement agency to provide for a federal immigration law enforcement presence at each location in Arizona where ballots are cast or deposited. It allows the county recorders and each board of supervisors to enter into such agreement either separately or jointly with one or more other county recorders or board of supervisors. Requires such an agreement to provide for the presence of federal immigration law enforcement personnel during all hours in which voting is conducted or ballots are deposited, including early voting locations, election day polling places, and ballot drop boxes. So they're literally going to camp out on polling stations, drop boxes, literally everywhere that anybody can send in a vote. This is ridiculous. And it's saying that it requires that federal immigration law enforcement be present there. And they're forcing them to enter into this agreement. They're forcing the states to work with the ICE Gestapo thugs during the election. This is completely crazy. And the reason that they're doing this, and you can read the whole thing, but the reason that they're doing this is because the Republicans, and Trump especially, knows that they are so underwater on everything that they cannot have free and fair elections if they want to retain power past 2026. It's going to be a bloodbath during the midterms, which is why we have to make it too big to rig. And so there are a couple of standing orders that I think anybody who's planning on voting should abide by. One is if you do vote in person, I would vote on election day. That way they can't, claim that all these ballots are coming in late, because that was the whole argument for 2020 was that all these ballot dumps came in late, and then it looked like Trump was winning, and overnight Biden started to win, and that meant that there was cheating. It's like the way that the rules work, and anybody who understands how election ballot counting works is they always count day of first, and then they count the mail-ins and the early votes. That's how it works. That's how it works for elections. But they know this, Republicans know this, which is why they were screaming, and Trump was screaming at the top of his lungs, that there's going to be fraud, there's going to be massive voter fraud, and understanding that those votes get counted second. It looks like, to the untrained eye, to the MAGA mouth breather that doesn't understand the order in which ballots are counted, that the election was stolen overnight by Biden. In 2020, this is what was known as the red mirage. So it looks like Trump is winning because, for whatever reason, Republicans are more likely to vote on election day than to vote by mail or to vote early. And Democrats, for whatever reason, are more likely to vote by mail and to vote early. So every time it's going to seem like, oh my God, the Republicans are winning at first. And then as the count continues, that lead dwindles and dwindles and dwindles. The other thing with ICE being at these polling stations is it's another voter suppression tactic, okay? Them trying to require that you bring your passport or your license or whatever it is. All of this stuff is totally illegal. ICE is not allowed to like demand papers from people at an election polling place. But they're going to do it anyway because what they're saying in all of these is that like they're not going to like interfere with the election except what is lawfully allowed by them in their duties, which Trump is going to tell them it is your duty to stop people who are not white and basically ask them for papers like the Gestapo. So they're really, really desperate. And in any free and fair election, the Republicans would get absolutely routed, just historically speaking. The pendulum always tends to swing back to whoever the party not in power is during the midterms. That always is the case, right? So like 2016 happens, Trump wins. 2018, the Republicans get routed, okay? And the same thing happened during Biden's term. It was like Biden wins in 2020, 2022, the Republicans take back the House and the Senate. So that is very normal to see that swing back and forth. So even in normal circumstances, you would probably see the Republicans lose a bunch of seats during the midterms because they're the party in power and that just happens to be how the pattern works. But the fact that they are so underwater on literally every single issue, I'm talking about the economy, immigration, the Epstein files, ICE's behavior in places like Minneapolis and LA and Chicago and wherever else it is that they're conducting these raids, the American people hate it. They cannot stand what's going on, and they're realizing, oh my God, we have got to do something. Like anybody but this guy, we've got to strip him of his powers. And so in a free and fair election, the Democrats would rout the Republicans no matter what. And even if there wasn't like some crazy circumstances like we've had in the past year, the likelihood is that Democrats would still take back the House and likely possibly the Senate as well, because that just happens to be the pattern, that happens to be the trend. But these guys are desperate, and so they're going to literally do everything in their power to make sure that this is not a free and fair election. We're seeing that already with, these kind of, declarations that ICE has to be at polling places and that the state needs to enter into these agreements. But the other thing too is like, we covered this a little while ago, Trump breaking into Fulton County, Georgia's election office and stealing all the 2020 ballots. And Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, for some reason is at this raid. And she's already going, oh yeah, I see a lot of irregularities with this election. Even though back in 2020, when Trump challenged this, when he challenged the 2020 election loss, he went to court, I think it was 63 times, and he lost every single case. And now all of a sudden, when they steal all the evidence and they put a Trump lackey like Tulsi Gabbard in charge of this investigation into the 2020 ballots, which this was 5 years ago at this point, now all of a sudden, a Trump lackey goes, you know what? I'm finding a lot of irregularities that every single court over 60 times laughed us out of the room. Anyway, so we gotta make it way too big to rig, and the way that we do that is, one, if you know people who are somebody that ICE would likely try and intimidate and screw around with during the election, make sure you go with those people to the polls. Make sure you go to the polls. Make sure you vote, because in any kind of election, and this is another trick by the Republicans, in any kind of election, if the turnout is high, the likelihood is that Democrats will win. And if turnout is low, the likelihood is that Republicans will win. So Republicans do all kinds of voter intimidation and voter suppression tactics in order to ensure that the voters that show up, that voter participation is very low, because that favors Republicans. The reason that Kamala Harris lost is not because Trump won tons and tons and tons more votes. He actually got pretty much the exact same number of votes in 2024 that he did in 2020. The difference was that 2020 was a very high turnout election for Democrats, and that 2024, nobody was excited about Kamala Harris because she essentially was like, I'm going to be the exact same as Joe Biden. And so it was not a high turnout election, and that's why Kamala Harris lost. The 8 million people that swung the election in 2020 for Joe Biden did not show up for Kamala Harris in 2024. So got to make sure that the turnout is high, got to make sure that it's too big to rig, make sure that you're going to the polling places with people so that you can help them get past these ICE thugs, which they're absolutely going to be at all these polling places. And what we really need on a local level is we need local law enforcement to keep these guys in check, because they're going to try all kinds of illegal things. I mean, talk about like going to vote and having a whole bunch of guys decked out in military gear and face masks, you know, asking you for your papers and trying to like disenfranchise you. It's the most un-American thing imaginable. But that's where we are in this country, because the Republicans are desperate and they cannot win based on their ideas, because their ideas are deeply, deeply unpopular. And we have to remember that and make sure that they understand that on election day in November. Anyway, guys, if you like this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the bell as well. That way you get a notification the next time I upload a video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.